Okay, I've got two videos that I'm going to make here to help you understand what's going on when we do when we use the indirect method for producing a cash flow statement. And this one is the conceptual logic behind the indirect cash flow statement. And so I'm just going to show you the equation, the algebra behind why we make the calculations we make when we calculate when we do the indirect cash flow method. And so let's just start here with the fundamental equation of accounting. Assets are equal to liabilities plus net assets. We could just as well write that equation this way. The delta here means change, so change in assets is equal to the change in liabilities plus the change in net assets. If there is some kind of change in asset, it's going to have to be equal to whatever the net change between the liabilities and the net assets are. If cash goes up, then it either had to go to another asset and therefore there was no change, or the cash goes up, it had to show up in the liability or the net asset, or some combination of the two. All right. We could also write this if we go back to the fundamental equation accounting, we could also write the fundamental equation accounting this way. Cash assets plus non-cash assets are equal to liabilities plus net assets. This is just dividing the asset category into two classifications. Okay, so that means we could also write this formula out this way. Change in cash plus change in non-cash is equal to the change in liability plus the change in net assets. This formula here is the same as this one. Change in assets is equal to change in liability plus change in net assets. It's just that when we divide the assets into cash and non-cash, we're just separating those two different types of assets out. So from here we can take this non-cash asset and move it over to the other side of the equation by just subtracting both sides by the change in non-cash assets and leaving the change in cash all alone on the left side of the equation. Okay, so we've got change in cash is equal to the change in liability plus the change in net assets minus the change in non-cash. And I'm just going to restructure this here so that I've got change in cash is equal to the change in net asset. I just moved net asset to the front plus change in liabilities minus the change in non-cash. And I've laid it out so that they're all lined up. When we do when we create a cash flow statement using the indirect method, we're going to begin with this number or this information here, the change in the net asset. And so what we're really trying to do is say, if we know the change in net asset, how do we identify what the change in cash was? Well, we know that the change in net asset is equal to the change in cash, except for we have to back out information on any changes in liabilities and any changes in non-cash assets. So if we then this change in net assets plus the change in liability, that will mean that we add to the net asset any increases in liability and pull out any decreases in liabilities. So if we take the net asset change in net asset value and add positive increases to liability accounts and decrease or subtract a decrease to a liability account, then that will help us pull out the information or adjust the information that we had from the net asset to get closer to the cash. Now we just have to deal with this non-cash. The non-cash is in the opposite direction, so any positive increase to non-cash is going to actually be subtracted from the change in net asset, and any decrease in non-cash accounts will increase to the from the net asset to get us to the cash. And so here it's all written out. The change in cash will be equal to the change in net asset plus adding in the value of increases to liability accounts, subtracting the decrease to in liability accounts, and then subtracting any increase in non-cash and adding in the value of any decrease in non-cash. So the next video I'm going to show you, we'll work through this logic a little bit.